All right, so welcome back, everybody. Today we're going deep on Nigeria.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a country that's, well, as you know, it's been in the news quite a bit lately.
For sure.
And we've got a lot of really great sources to dig into today.
Also.
We've got The Nation, we've got Leadership, Daily Trust, Daily Post, and This Day Live.
Wow, that's quite a collection.
It is, yeah. And they're all painting, well, a really interesting picture of what's happening right now in Nigeria, you know, politically, on the security front, and of course, economically, both inside the country and on the world stage.
I'm ready to dive in. Sounds fascinating.
Okay, well, let's jump right in then. Let's
Yeah.
start with the political scene.
Okay.
The Nation is reporting that the Bauchi chapter of the APC, that's the All Progressives Congress, right?
Right.
They're putting pressure on the federal government saying, look, we need more economic relief.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and they're pointing to some real struggles that people are facing, on the
Yeah.
ground.
That's significant, isn't it? Because it suggests that the economic difficulties are hitting even within the ruling party's own strongholds.
Exactly.
It's not just some quiet murmur of discontent either. It's a direct call for action coming from inside the APC.
And then you've got this whole debate around the security appointments.
Right.
Which is getting pretty heated, actually.
Yeah.
The Nation also reported on this, that the presidency is pushing back against claims that, they're favoring the Southwest when it comes to these appointments. Why is this such a touchy subject, do you think?
Well, in a nation as diverse as Nigeria, the balance of power is, well, it's always very fragile, isn't it?
Yeah.
And any perception of bias in these important positions, especially security roles, it can just fuel those existing regional tensions.
So it's not just about who gets the job.
Exactly.
It's about what that appointment represents.
It really feeds into those broader narratives about who holds the power, about representation, all those things that are constantly simmering beneath the surface in Nigeria.
Okay, and then Daily Trust and Daily Post are both covering this review by the Attorney General
Okay.
of the treason charges that were brought against those #EmbedGovernance protesters, remember?
Yeah.
Is there any chance that those charges could actually be dropped?
It's definitely a possibility, and it would be a big move if they did.
Right.
Because you have to remember, those protests, they were met with a really strong response from the government.
Yeah.
And those treason charges, they sparked international outrage. I mean, people were really concerned.
Sure.
Dropping those charges could be a way to try and, bring about some reconciliation.
Right.
But it's definitely a risky move.
How so?
Well, for one thing, some people might see it as a sign of weakness on the government's part,
Right.
potentially encouraging more protests in the future.
That makes sense.
And then there's that claim from the IGP, Daily Post reported this one, saying those minors who fainted in court during the proceedings were faking it. Yeah, it just adds a whole other layer of complexity to what was already a very sensitive situation.
Absolutely.
It raises some serious questions about how the government is dealing with dissent and, whether they're truly following due process.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Now, shifting gears a bit, we have the Zenith Labor Party. They had a huge win, a landslide, actually, in the local government elections in Adibia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, The Nation and Daily Post both covered that.
Interesting.
But what does this tell us?
Well, even though it's a local win, it could still point to some bigger changes happening in the political landscape, don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that the Zenith Labor Party did so well, it could be a sign that voters are looking for other options, beyond those established parties.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see if this momentum continues, if it carries over into future elections.
So just to recap, we've got internal pressures on the ruling party, accusations of regional bias, a high-profile legal case that involves protesters, and now potentially a shift in how people are voting.
That's a lot going on.
What's your take on the overall mood in Nigeria right now, politically speaking?
I'd say there's definitely a lot of uncertainty in the air.
Yeah.
You've got the economic hardships, the security concerns, and then all those questions about how the government is responding to dissent. It all contributes to this feeling that things are, in flux.
Makes sense.
The upcoming elections are going to be really crucial, I think. I mean, they could either solidify the current power structures, or they could usher in something completely new.
All right, well, let's move on now and take a look at the security situation, which seems to be, well, a bit of a mixed bag.
Okay.
The Nation and Daily Post are reporting that troops have captured a really key figure in the fight against terrorism in the Northwest, a man named Habu Dogo.
Oh, wow.
This feels like a pretty significant victory, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, Habidogo was a major target, and his capture will definitely disrupt those terrorist groups that are operating in the region.
Right.
It's a huge intelligence win for the security forces, and it weakens those networks, which is critical.
But then at the same time that we're hearing about this success, the nation is also reporting on these terrible attacks in Benue.
Oh, no.
Yeah, these are being blamed on suspected herdsmen, and they've left behind, well, it's just devastating. A lot of death and people displaced from their homes.
It's just awful.
It really underscores the fact that the security challenges in Nigeria, well, they're far from over.
It's a harsh reality. And, we have to remember these are not just isolated incidents.
Right.
They're often rooted in much deeper issues, things like competition for resources, land disputes, and those ethnic tensions that have been simmering for a long time.
And those underlying problems are only made worse by...
Climate change and the
Yeah.
political instability.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to think about those communities who are caught in the crossfire.
It really is.
They're the ones who are bearing the brunt of these complex problems.
It's so easy for their stories to get lost, amid all the headlines.
Right.
But it's so important that we remember the human cost of these conflicts.
Absolutely.
These are real people whose lives are being torn apart.
Okay, so let's turn our attention to the economy now.
Right.
The Nation highlights this pretty incredible figure. They're projecting Nigeria's annual tax income to be N21 trillion.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is, and it makes you wonder, with that kind of potential revenue, do they even need to borrow money?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, if they can actually achieve that level of tax revenue, it could significantly reduce how much they have to rely on borrowing.
Right.
And think about it, if the government can effectively collect those taxes, it would free up so many resources for crucial things like infrastructure development, education, and healthcare.
It sounds great in theory.
But there's always a but.
Effective tax collection, that's a big if.
Of course, Nigeria faces a lot of obstacles when it comes to collecting taxes. You've got a large informal economy, tax evasion, corruption. It's a complex system.
It sounds like they need a system that's not only efficient, but also one that people trust.
Absolutely. People need to believe that their taxes are being used responsibly.
Makes sense. And speaking of empowering people, the Nation also reports that the federal government is really pushing for young Nigerians to learn technical skills.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they're saying this is a key strategy to tackle the unemployment problem.
So what kind of skills are we talking about here?
Well, it seems to be a shift away from those more traditional educational paths, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's more about focusing on the skills that are really in demand in today's job market. Things like, well, digital literacy, for one,
Okay.
critical thinking skills, also vocational trades, those kinds of practical skills that can be applied across different sectors, helping young people adapt to, the constantly changing economy.
That's a smart approach.
Yeah, it's not just about having a degree anymore. It's about having those practical skills that allow you to really thrive.
Right. Those skills that make you employable in the real world.
Exactly. And this focus on technical skills, it actually ties into another interesting development. The Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, he came out and said, no more renewing oil licenses unless there's a commitment to development.
Oh, wow. That's a bold statement.
It is. The Nation, leadership, and This Day Live all covered that, by the way.
Interesting. So what's the strategy behind that, do you think?
Well, it seems to be about moving away from just extracting resources and towards demanding real investment in the communities where this oil exploration is happening.
That makes sense.
The goal is to make sure that the benefits of oil wealth actually reach the local communities and that it contributes to sustainable development.
So it's about making sure that the oil wealth benefits everyone.
Exactly. Now, it sounds like a win-win, but I imagine some foreign investors might be a little hesitant about this, right?
Yeah, I mean, some might be put off by having to commit to development projects up front, especially with all the complexities of Nigeria's oil sector.
Yeah.
So the government's going to have to figure out how to attract investment while also making sure that the investment ultimately benefits the entire nation.
That's a delicate balance to strike.
It is.
This is also fascinating. We've covered political maneuvering, security issues, and economic shifts, but we're not done yet. There's a lot more to explore when it comes to Nigeria's place on the global stage, especially when it comes to the achievements and the challenges that the people are facing.
Absolutely. There are so many inspiring stories about Nigerians who are breaking barriers, making their mark all over the world.
Right.
And then there are those societal issues that need our attention, things that need to be addressed.
For sure. We'll dive into all of that after the break. Stay tuned.
And we're back, ready to explore more of what's happening in Nigeria, especially its cultural landscape and how it's engaging with the world.
You know, it's a country that's just brimming with talent, so much ambition, and we're really seeing Nigerians making an impact globally.
Absolutely.
Take Kemi Badenoch, for example.
Oh, right.
Her election as leader of the UK Conservative Party, that's huge.
It is. It's historic.
The Nation, Daily Post, This Day Live, they all highlighted this win. And it's a big deal. I mean, she's the first black woman to ever hold that position.
Yeah. It's a landmark achievement, and not just for the UK, but for representation, on a global level.
It really is.
Her success is so inspiring, especially for women, and particularly Black women, who are aiming for leadership roles in spaces that have traditionally been, well, dominated by men.
It's about breaking down those barriers.
Exactly. It shows that change is possible, that those diverse voices, they deserve to be heard, they deserve a seat at the table.
And speaking of powerful voices, The Nation reported on First Lady Oluremi Tinubu. She's urging Nigerian women to support each other in the political arena.
That's important.
Yeah, especially considering how underrepresented women have been in Nigerian politics, historically.
You're right. It's a huge issue. I mean, women in Nigerian politics, they face so many obstacles, starting with societal expectations, cultural norms.
Right.
And then you have the lack of access to resources, to networks. It's a tough landscape.
So the First Lady's call for solidarity, it's really important.
It is. It's about taking those crucial steps to break down the barriers and create a more inclusive political system.
It's about women supporting each other, lifting each other up.
Exactly, and paving the way for future generations of female leaders.
Because when women have a voice in decision-making, it benefits everyone.
Absolutely. Diverse perspectives are essential for good governance, for equitable governance.
Okay, now let's shift gears a bit and talk about a social issue that the nation brought up. The House of Representatives is taking action to address stigma and discrimination against people with tuberculosis.
That's crucial.
Why is it so important to tackle this issue?
Well, because stigma, it creates a huge barrier to treatment.
Right.
People are afraid to seek help. They're worried about being ostracized, judged by their communities.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that fear, it leads to delayed diagnosis, delayed treatment, which puts individuals at risk, but also entire communities.
It's a reminder that healthcare is about more than just medicine.
Exactly.
It's about creating an environment where people feel safe, supported, where they can seek help without shame or judgment.
It's about addressing those social determinants of health, those factors that are often overlooked but play a huge role in people's well-being.
And on a more positive note, the nation highlighted the upcoming Moses Unilag 2024 Summit, which is all about student entrepreneurship.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's happening in December at the University of Lagos, and it really seems to capture the energy and drive of Nigeria's young people.
It's so inspiring to see this level of entrepreneurship, the innovation, especially considering the economic challenges the country is facing.
They're not waiting for opportunities, they're creating their own.
Exactly. And this summit, it gives them a platform to showcase their ideas, to connect with potential investors, to really build the future they want.
So to sum it all up, we've seen a nation grappling with some very serious challenges, but also a nation that's full of potential, full of resilience. We've seen political maneuvering, a desire for change, security concerns, along with some victories against terrorism, and a dynamic economy with both opportunities and obstacles.
And we can't forget the incredible talent, the determination of the Nigerian people making their mark globally, driving progress from within.
It's a complex and fascinating picture, and it leaves us with a lot to think about.
It does, and it's great that we can have these deep dives to really explore the nuances, the connections, the potential solutions that might otherwise remain hidden.
Before we wrap up our exploration of Nigeria, though, we want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question, something that ties together many of the themes we've explored today.
I'm all ears.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, right? We talked about the political landscape, the security challenges, the economy, and cultural scene in Nigeria. But there's one thing that's really been sticking with me.
Oh, what's that?
Remember how we talked about the government's push for young people to focus on those technical skills?
Right.
And then there was the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources saying, look, no more renewing those oil licenses unless there's a commitment to development, you know?
Yeah, I remember.
What if those two things, those two seemingly separate initiatives, are actually the keys to unlocking a new era of growth for Nigeria? Sustainable and inclusive growth.
I see where you're going with this.
I mean, think about it. If Nigeria can empower its young people with the right skills for a diversifying economy, and at the same time use that oil wealth to drive real sustainable development.
You're talking about creating a powerful engine for progress.
Exactly. Imagine a future where Nigeria's young people are leading the way, not just in oil and gas, but in tech, renewable energy, agriculture, you name it,
Mm.
and where the wealth generated from resources actually benefits the local communities, fuels broader economic growth.
That's a really compelling vision.
And it's achievable, I think, if they implement the right policies, make the right investments.
It would definitely take a concerted effort, bridging that gap between the traditional industries and those emerging sectors, making sure that the benefits of growth are shared equitably.
But it's possible.
It is. It's definitely possible.
It's a good reminder that even with all the headlines, all the challenges, there's always hope, always opportunity.
That's what makes these deep dives so fascinating, uncovering those glimmers of possibility.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our exploration of Nigeria, we really encourage you to dig deeper, check out those sources we mentioned,
Yeah, explore the topics that piqued your interest.
form your own conclusions, and most importantly, keep asking those critical questions.
And join us next time for another deep dive into a new and fascinating topic.
Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those minds engaged.